Listen, everybody. Let's bake a delicious cake for Mario.
Oh no! It's only been 2 days since I spent $60 on this new video game, and now I'm already done with it. What am I supposed to do now? Wait for Super Mario 65 to come out? Well, I suppose I'll just be patient. I mean, it should only take like a year or something. Has this ever happened to you? Wow, if only there was more content in my game, my life would be more fulfilling and I wouldn't have to go outside. Well, you're in luck. Now there's more stuff for you to do, like online play, multiple endings, a post-game with new levels. With all this new content, now your game is worth half its price. Wow, that's amazing! Have you ever bought a game before and regretted it instantly? Like, you know, maybe it's fine and all, but it's not fun enough and doesn't have enough content in it to warrant its price tag. With the games costing $60 freaking, I feel like more than ever now, you'll hear complaints about games being too short or not being worth the money. And now you gotta work in the fast food industry. And it doesn't really help that a lot of modern games, it just sort of feel like that they're missing something. Maybe a lack of change or features that previous installments had. Games really need more stuff to do, such as side quests or maybe mini games that reward you for going the extra mile of completing them, or other optional things that make the experience all the more special. You know, while you're at it, you should keep me coming back after I finish the main story. Give me collectibles to find, or new modes to encourage me to replay the game. Anything, really.
Super Luigi Galaxy!
If I really love a game, then I'll usually find myself searching for everything I missed the first time through, and that adds a lot of playtime and makes the game I already like even better. Though not all games need a lot of extra content, obviously. Some are fun enough that just a few extra things to do is more than satisfactory, and games like visual novels are just books, and you know what they say, the less reading the better. And there's a certain point where there's too much stuff packed into one game, and it begins to detract from the experience when you go out of your way to complete it. It's not like it's well-designed content either. It's filler, plain and simple, solely there so that critics won't complain about the game being bare bones. We can't seem to find a good balance nowadays. Some games feel incomplete, and others are more overstuffed than that can of Chef Boyardee that I filled with silly putty. Remember back in the good old days when video games got finished? Nowadays, buying a game is like getting a hamburger, but the meat is missing, and you know, you might get the meat in like a few months or something, and what you're currently left with is a visual representation of my YouTube career. Now granted, the really old stuff is pretty lackluster by today's standards. See, back then games were still seen as just arcade titles, like you pick them up, play them for like 20 minutes trying to get a high score until you lose, and then you go do something better. And man, I can't imagine spending more than a couple bucks on some of these considering how simplistic they are. I mean, I can't blame them for being that way. These were gaming's baby years after all, and I think all of us were disappointing in our baby years. But even all the way back then, some games would make the effort of being more worthwhile. I mean, Adventure back in 1980 had 3 separate levels for you to play, each more complicated than the last.
Explore over 3 levels.
And that's good. That's what makes this game into a hood classic. Because I remember learning how to speedrun this game in like 30 seconds when I was 7. But that's okay because there are 2 longer, separate adventures to play on the same cartridge. Meanwhile, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Frog Pond. This is the whole game. Someone paid $40 for this. Oh no, buddy, I love frogs as much as the next guy, but I'm still gonna call you out on your bullshit. You're a disgrace to all frogs. A fraud! Hop Frog Fractions would be so ashamed of you! As games continue to evolve, they got bigger. Obviously. By the time we get to the 16-bit era, it's pretty common to see longer games bordering on 20 hours, plenty of collectibles, and tons of wild-ass secrets that you don't see anymore. Can I just say that I miss all the wacky secrets that you'd see from this time period? Like that special world in Super Mario World that completely changes everything and all the enemies whenever you complete it, like What's going on? Though I guess it makes sense why we don't see this anymore, because it obviously took a lot of effort to put this together, and I bet very few people have actually seen this, considering how much work you have to go through to unlock this. And even in the mid-2000s, dude, now that was the era I grew up in. Growing up, there were so many games that I sunk dozens of hours into just because there was so much to do. These days, games cost more despite having less substance in most cases, and then if you actually want more stuff to do, you have to buy some DLC that was released the same fucking day as the game. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind downloadable content and all, but, and please excuse this Sub-Zero take I'm about to give off here, I think most of us can agree that it's been the source of countless greedy business decisions, and to me, a lot of DLC hasn't really been a satisfactory substitute for content in the base game, because DLC is typically disconnected from the rest of the game and on a much smaller scale, yet it still costs anywhere from $10 to $30. You know, if extra content and stuff used to be so awesome, then I guess I should go ahead and list off some of my favorite examples. Collectathons are a good example of this, of course. Lots of fun stuff to pick up in a big 3D world to explore, and you're very likely to still have a lot of stuff to go back and get after you've beaten the final boss due to the way these types of games are structured. And wouldn't you know, you used to see a lot of these types of games in the late 90s and early 2000s. And credit where credit is due, whenever a modern one is released, they typically find a way to capture the charm of the classics, which is frankly unbelievable. But I'm very happy that that's the case. Oh, and of course, whenever I talk about side content and stuff, I gotta talk about RPGs. Huge games with all sorts of dungeons to explore, optional or not, items to find, side quests to do, and ignoring my responsibilities of saving the world to play stupid minigames. I just love to stop and smell the roses while playing games like this and really let them sink in, because my favorite RPGs tend to have side quests that give you cool weapons and powers and stuff for doing them. Both of the Dragon Quest games I've played, 11 and 8, while having their fair share of boring fetch quests are about as fun as going shopping with your mom at Target, they also tend to have awesome in-game side quests and post-games to do. There's one in 11 that literally expands the skill tree of 2 characters, opening up more options for both, and another set of dungeons and bosses that will give you awesome rewards and sick-ass drip for doing them. How could I possibly resist? Or what about Bravely Default and Second, where every side quest gives you a new job to play around with, expanding your strategy so much more with each one you collect. Even smaller scale games like Lisa, where I'd say half of the game is actually optional. But due to the way the game is designed, you'll find yourself doing optional stuff without even knowing, fighting important battles, getting all sorts of items and new party members to help you progress through the game. Sure as hell beats grinding random enemies till the rat population goes extinct. And that's not the only example of an RPG Maker game with a stupid amount of extra stuff to do. I would like to personally commend the Jimbo and the Pulsating Mass for having so much stuff to do in it that it rivals AAA products in terms of content, and yet somehow it was only developed by one guy. But one of my favorite forms of extra content is Unlockables. You know, like the standard stuff such as unlockable characters in fighting games or whatever. But let me say, I've played a lot of survival horror games in the past year, and these games love to have the stupidest, and I mean stupidest unlockables you'll ever see. Ranging from ridiculous costumes to overpowered weapons, throwing this silly stuff into scary games, funnily enough, gave series like Silent Hill and Resident Evil even more personality. I love games that can be totally serious and have deep subjects. And if you beat it in less than 2 hours, you unlock a hot dog outfit. Not only are these fun to unlock, but they encourage you to replay the game and do better at it, which can lead you to appreciating and enjoying the game even more. And you know something else that's really cool? Meth. Achievements. I love achievements. Like, okay, in-game ones aren't really that interesting, but like Steam achievements, for example, that's the good stuff. I just really like having my progress displayed on my profile. That way, if someone looks at it, they can say, oh hey, he tried to look up porn in a hat in time. And if I really love a game, I almost always find myself going after every single achievement, so long as it's actually feasible. That way I can proudly show off my 100% completion rating, and so people know what I smell like. Unfortunately, the only gaming platform I use that has an achievement system tied to your profile is Steam, and I really wish Nintendo would implement a feature like that on Switch. I mean, come on, it's been a staple on other platforms for over a decade now.
They added achievements.
Oh. These aren't achievements, this is just a grocery list. Is playing Kirby Superstar really that hard? Well, all of that stuff I just listed off is still present to some extent nowadays, but like I said, there's something missing most of the time. Whether it's a smaller roster of characters or stages in an online game, features being cut, short campaigns with little to do outside of them, the value of games nowadays has been brought into question a lot. And for good reason. I don't want to pay more money for a game that looks prettier but has less than its predecessor. I think I've made my point clear by now. However, while I'm at it, I think I should stress that not every modern game is like this. There's way too many cases of actually polished modern games being lumped in with half-baked ones simply because they're too short or something. See, unless if you're an online game or a 40-hour action RPG, I feel like there's always one person who will complain about a game being $60 despite only taking 10 hours to beat the main story. A Metroid Dread was a pretty recent example of this. It's around 7 hours long or something for your first playthrough, and there's not much to do outside of trying to get all the collectibles or playing the game in a quicker time or on a higher difficulty. But even though it's short, I don't think that necessarily means it's not worth its price tag. I'm not a huge Metroidvania guy, and let me tell you, this one was really fun, engaging, and pretty damn polished, so much so that I actually played through it again, and I'm sure that die-hard fans of the series have done several more playthroughs and will do many more. I sort of got everything I expected from the game, and it doesn't feel incomplete in any way. See, my issue is if it's short or shallow and not really all that impressive, then we have a problem. I've also seen some people complain about the length of Resident Evil 7. Keep in mind, this was a survival horror game released in 2017. It had been a while since a traditional survival horror game had come out, so people didn't really get it. Like I said earlier, these types of games heavily encourage replayability through higher difficulties or fun, stupid unlockables. And sure, 7 didn't really have much to do outside of the main campaign at launch, and it did fall into the early DLC nonsense I criticized previously. But I'm sorry, some of the takes I've seen regarding this game's length were plain stupid. I once read a Steam review saying that the game should have been at least 30 hours long. What? 30 hours is a lot longer than you might think, and thinking a survival horror game should be that long is ludicrous. Look, I agree that games should have fun stuff to do to keep me coming back after beating them, but I don't think a game taking a short amount of time to finish automatically makes it not worth your time or money. That's such a narrow-minded point of view. And let me tell you now, in the past few years, I've really felt every last hour of the games I've played, and games that should not be over 20 hours long, that are 20 hours long, freaking drag. Bigger is not always better. Much like how a game with too little to do has the possibility of holding back the experience, games with too much can be equally as problematic. There's a big difference between having side content that's well thought out and fun, and having side content that sucks. You know how some games will have parts in the story that feel like filler? I've noticed a few instances of games having a crazy amount of optional stuff to do that feels the same way. And the strange thing is that nobody really talks about it. Probably because most players will just move on to a new game instead of sticking to one they've already finished, or maybe they just think more stuff is a good thing. One game I see a lot of criticism towards is Super Mario Odyssey. Now fellas, don't get me wrong, this is a top 10 Lego game. I love Odyssey and all, but let's be frank, there's too many moons. One time I took a piss and I got a moon, and then later that day I pissed again, but this time the toilet was smaller and harder to piss into, but I got another moon for doing that. The game is great when playing through it normally, but my dumbass went out of his way to get every single moon, and it was alright. Unlike other Mario collectathons, there's a lot more to collect in this one, and while it is satisfying picking up a ton of moons, it begins to get a little tedious when trying to find every last one. Especially considering that you get a lot of them for doing the most mundane of tasks. This problem was so huge that somebody made a movie about it. Okay, well, I don't really think this ruins the game like some people make it out to. And what's your reward for getting every last moon? Like I said, I love Odyssey, but if they ever do a sequel, I think they should cut down the amount of collectibles and give each one more thoughtful placement. Make 100%ing the game just as fun as playing through it casually. Sometimes less is more. I remember the same year I 100%ed that game, I did the same thing with Psychonauts. Now, most of this game is pretty great. The collectibles are really fun to get, and as you get more, you get rank ups that can upgrade your powers. It's really fun. But there's one collectible that I think every person who's ever tried to complete this game hates. The Fig Newton. The figments. There's a ton of these in each level, and they're supposed to be small, easy to find collectibles that you'll get while casually playing through. But when you're hunting down all of them, then it turns into a game of finding a piece of corn in a beehive. Due to the figments being translucent and flat, it can be hard to spot them from a distance, and nothing is more awful than searching for the last one in each mind, especially Mia's dance party. The slide segment in that level has way too many figments. I'd rather get a root canal on my penis. And some clinically insane person wrote up a guide on where every single individual one is placed. Keep in mind, there's upwards of 200 per level. This dude is doing God's work. And good sir, if you are watching this video right now, then 1, thank you so much, and 2, does this image scare you? Oh, and they also mitigated this issue in the sequel by patching in a figment detector after I already completed it, so that's cool. Now, this next game might sound like it doesn't belong in this category at all, and you might think I'm stupid, which, yeah, you have a point. But as someone who's 100%ed this game, I really want everyone to know about this, because I don't see anyone talk about it. Completing Resident Evil Village is a nightmare. Village was a game I loved when I first played it, so needless to say, I would replay it every now and then whenever I was bored, and I started picking up achievements and stuff, and at a certain point, I decided to get all of them. I eventually got them all, and at that point, I was getting a little burnt out, more cracks started to show in the game's design, and I started to like it less. But now that I was done with the achievements, I had also finished up most of the end-game challenges, little missions that involve killing enemies or finding certain treasures and whatnot, and I only had a few more to complete till I truly had 100%, so I just said screw it and went for the last few I was missing. This was painful. Some of these require killing ridiculous amounts of enemies over the course of multiple playthroughs, finding all of the treasures, getting your money to a specific value, getting enemies to kill themselves, beating bosses in a certain amount of time, killing enemies with specific weapons, and these amounts just get stupid. There's one for killing 50 enemies with landmines. Oh boy, I only have to do that 49 more times. This isn't fun. This is menial garbage that makes 100% in the game akin to going errand running with your grandma. I know I keep bringing up Village and all these other games in these videos, and like, man, I gotta make a whole video dedicated to Village at some point. And let's not even get started on the likes of Crash Bandicoot 4. Now, this one actually ended up getting major backlash for the way it handled 100%. Essentially, to get 100% in this game, you have to pretty much play through every level perfectly, get various collectibles throughout the stage, and not die a certain amount of times, all in one run. Not only that, but you have to do the exact same thing for alternate versions of each level. Completion time for this game takes upwards of 80 hours. What the fuck? That's not interesting or even a fun challenge unless if you're a complete maniac. I've barely scratched the surface of how bad this gets. I highly recommend watching one of the mini videos on the topic. Unlike the other games I just mentioned, I didn't like this game enough to even bother attempting 100%. It's one of the most infamous cases of a bloated game in recent years, and for a good reason. I already thought Crash 4 was just kind of okay, but horrendous design like this instead of something more thoughtful made my opinion of it drop even further. So yeah, more does not automatically equal better. I want games to be worth my money, but I don't want them stuffed with boring nothingness that's only there to fill a quota. I want to be excited to play my favorite games even more and unlock new stuff, uncover new things, and have a blast watching my completion total get higher and higher. Whenever the entire game is so wonderfully constructed, that just makes me love it even more. Anyway, I'm Luggo the Luggician, and well, now I'm kinda sad. Congratulations! You've done literally fucking everything for this video. Here's your reward or whatever. For me? Oh, I've wanted one of these bad boys ever since I was a little baby Luggo.